Welcome to this explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here today. Now, I need you to do me a quick favor. Close your eyes for a sec. Well, keep them open so you can see what I'm showing you. Actually, scratch that. But I want you to picture me standing in front of you wearing a rough, itchy wool tunic. I've got a pitchfork in my hand, and there's a whole lot of dirt under my fingernails. Today, we're going way back to the 14th century, and I'm putting you right in the mud-caked boots of an English peasant. We are going to explore one of the most terrifying, literally world-altering periods in all of human history. But we're looking at it from the ground up, from the perspective of the working class. Because, crazy enough, out of this massive, unimaginable tragedy, a completely new world of social upheaval and workers' rights was actually born.
Okay, let's dive into this. The year is 1352. Half my village is dead, but for the first time in my life, I am free. It's a chilling paradox, isn't it? Just imagine surviving an apocalypse that wiped out your family, your friends, and the guy who bakes your bread. For almost my entire life and the lives of generations before me, we were strictly locked to the land. But suddenly, the sheer devastation of the plague has broken our chains. To understand how we peasants gained this sudden, unbelievable freedom, we first have to look at the massive scale of the horror we just survived.
Chapter 1. The Great Mortality. A biological catastrophe.
For a few terrifying years, mostly between 1348 and 1351, it genuinely felt like the end of the world had arrived. 46%, a massive 46% of England's population was just wiped out. Across the rest of Europe, it was a very similar story, with anywhere from a third to a half of the population dead. We had no vaccines, our doctors thought bleeding us out was a legitimate cure, and our sanitary conditions were, well, let's just say they left a lot to be desired. Death came for absolutely everyone, rich and poor. But let's move on and see how this nightmare actually built into a completely unexpected economic reality for those of us who survived.
The staggering human cost in England alone is just hard to fathom. We dropped from 4.8 million people down to 2.6 million survivors. That is 2.2 million souls gone in the blink of an eye. The bubonic plague struck us down indiscriminately, and it even killed our animals. But you know what the plague didn't kill? It didn't kill the gold sitting in the Lord's coffers. It didn't kill the rich soil, and it absolutely didn't kill the wheat and crops growing in the fields. That land still needed to be cultivated, and the work desperately needed doing. But there was almost no one left to do it. And that right there set the stage for a massive, unprecedented shift in supply and demand.
Which brings us to Chapter 2, A Harvest of Riches, Power to the Workers.
When the dust finally settled, we buried our dead and looked around. There was vastly less labor available, but the exact same amount of land, wealth, and food to go around. And this brilliantly illustrates the shift. Before the plague, we lived under the feudal system of serfdom. We were legally tied to a specific lord and his manor. Sure, some peasants entered it voluntarily for lower rents, a stable income, and a low-risk life, but we had absolutely zero freedom. After 1351, though, we transformed into free laborers. Because the landlords were so utterly desperate for tenants to work their empty fields, their risk-reward trade-off completely flipped. We could pack up our stuff, move to a new village, and market our skills to the highest bidder, knowing with absolute certainty that we'd find better pay.
Historical accounts of the time capture this perfectly. Check this out. Such a shortage of workers ensued that the humble turned up their noses at employment, unless for triple wages. You guys, that humble worker, that's me. Can you even imagine the sheer audacity it took for a peasant in the 1350s to look a wealthy lord dead in the eye, turn up their nose, and demand triple the wages? We finally had the bargaining power to demand what our backbreaking labor was actually worth, and you better believe we took full advantage of it. And hey, it wasn't just about extra coins clinking in our pockets. It fundamentally changed how we lived, and honestly, what we ate. Gone was the endless watery gruel. Because of our new wealth, laborers like me saw massive improvements to our diets. We were suddenly feasting on fresh fish and actual meat. We washed it down with good ale, and oh my goodness, we finally tasted the soft, sweet luxury of white bread. For a brief, shining moment, we were really tasting the good life. But as you can probably guess, the lords and ladies weren't exactly going to let us enjoy this new reality for long.
Let's move to Chapter 3, The Lord's Unfair Laws. Controlling the poor.
So, the wealthy landed elite are watching their profits shrink as our wages triple, and total panic sets in. They had absolutely no intention of letting the working class turn their comfortable world upside down. They needed to force us back into our place, and they used the full power of the government to do it. Just 4 years after that first wave, Parliament passed the horrific 1351 Statute of Laborers. Listen to this. They legally froze our wages at pre-plague levels. They made it a literal criminal offense for us to demand higher pay, and even a crime for a desperate employer to offer it. Worse still, if we tried to exercise our new freedom and leave our home villages to find a fair wage somewhere else, we could be arrested, or even branded with a hot iron. And to top the whole shebang off, employment became strictly mandatory for anyone able-bodied. It was just a blatant, heavy-handed attempt to drag us kicking and screaming right back into serfdom.
But now what's really interesting here is that these harsh laws didn't actually stop us. The economy was completely disconnected from reality, and we were more than willing to take the risk. Take this actual court record from 1374. It's about a laborer named John Fisher and a few others from Bardney. They flat out refused to work for the abbot's unfairly stipulated wages. They just said nope and left town that very same day to get paid better elsewhere. They did it in contempt of the king and contrary to statute. We were out there actively breaking these unfair laws, and honestly, a lot of lords were so desperate for workers, they were quietly bending the rules to hire us anyway.
Chapter 4. Marching on London. The Peasants Revolt.
For decades, this tension just simmered. The government kept squeezing us, not just with that statute of laborers, but with crushing new taxes, specifically the massively unpopular poll tax of 1380. By 1381, the working class had simply had enough. We were done bending rules in the shadows. It was time for open revolt. It all kicked off in Kent and Essex, where tens of thousands of us actually took up arms. Led by Wat Tyler and a radical priest named John Ball, we marched directly on London. Our demands were crystal clear: abolish serfdom and give us the right to rent land freely. And, no way, we actually captured London. It was wild. We razed a palace, forced the surrender of the Tower of London, and executed the Archbishop and the Treasurer, literally the architects of that hated poll tax. We brought King Richard II right to the negotiation table. But, well, it ended in tragedy. The king falsely promised to meet our demands for reform just to get us to disperse and go home. Once we did, he executed Wat Tyler and our remaining leaders. No legal reforms were ever enacted. But we did successfully stop that wretched poll tax. And similar peasant riots were absolutely terrifying the elites over in northern France around this time too. We proved we had teeth.
Chapter 5. A New World for Us. The Long-Term Outcomes.
So the crucial point is, after the plagues and the bloody rebellions, the legacy of this era is a deeply mixed bag. On our side, the peasant victories were undeniable. Serfdom was essentially dead. We emerged as free laborers, fundamentally changing the building blocks of society forever. And we secured much better short-term living conditions and diets. That huge shift really laid the groundwork for emancipation centuries down the line. However, the aristocracy ruthlessly retained control of the country, crushing our revolts. And, as historian Eleanor Russell points out, the wealthy actually found clever new ways to hoard their power. They started writing highly specific wills to ensure their massive estates and patrimony were never ever divided up after death, ending their old practice of giving a third of their resources to charity. So in many ways, the plague just forced the rich to get better at staying rich.
Which brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with today. We survived the deadliest disease in human history. We used the resulting labor shortage to finally end the chains of serfdom. We upgraded our diets, demanded triple wages, and even marched on the King of England to demand our rights. We changed the economy forever. But did we truly defeat the wealthy elite? Or did they just adapt the rules of the game to keep us in our place? It's a question that, honestly, working people are still asking themselves today. Thank you so much for taking this journey back to the 14th century with me, and I really hope this explainer gives you a whole new appreciation for the turbulent, absolutely fascinating birth of workers' rights.